Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's sticking to me like bees on honey, no matter what I think of it.
Tim Longo.
I sometimes wonder if you just sit
Hello.
playing a game and like hear things and think, is that it this week? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Is that the one he's going to hit me with?
Absolutely. It happens all the time. I should take notes actually and predict my predictions about what. But that one I don't remember. Was that Paige said that?
The page says it before you go to the first.
Oh, that's right.
When you first take off from the hideout.
Greatest. Yeah, Paige is a very memorable.
He is pretty great. We will get into that. We haven't even announced the game yet. Nobody knows what we're playing.
How are we doing this again? I feel like we haven't done this in about a month. So through various
it's been a few weeks. Yeah, it's been 3 weeks since we last chatted. But we are turning to a new game, a new old game. And that is Beyond Good and Evil, which just a few years ago, Tim learned was the name of a book by Nietzsche. You may remember that. We heard it here live.
Yeah,
on the cast.
It clever. Hey, man, who knew that this was the adaptation of a book?
Yeah, who knew?
I better read that science fiction book.
That book also has a ton of various things in it. Yeah, you don't. I don't know if you'd enjoy that book. I have to say,
no, I don't seek him out normally.
No, he's very. It's got a lot of very pithy sayings, many of them wrong. Anyway, this is from UbiSoft in 2003. I went today and thought, oh, we must have done some other games in 2003, and of course we did. We've done Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, also by Ubisoft. In 2003, which I thought was really, really funny. Yep, the heyday of Ubisoft. We've done 3 games from Ubisoft, we're doing our 3rd game from Ubisoft, and 2 of them came from the same year, which was a little surprising to me. It is, of course, from Michel Ancel, the celebrated, very French designer, project leader, director, I guess they'd say. Directeur, they would say, of numerous games, most notably, of course, the Rayman series. I think that's what he's best known for, but also this game, particularly beloved game. Kind of funny that we're only getting to it now. What's your history with this game? You played it back in the day, I gather.
Yeah, I did. I played it when it came out. I had 2 rounds. Yeah, when it came out, I played it and either hit a wall or moved on to something else. My memory is it's a little bit longer than you expect it to be. And then I had a second attempt quite a few years, maybe five years later, where I got pretty far. I don't think I fully finished it, but I mean, surprise. But you mentioned some stuff that happens toward the end that I kind of remember, so I must have gotten pretty far.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm familiar with it, and I forget there was a specific reason. I mean, like you said, it had a really good reputation at the time for sure of just being a kind of a special gem of a game. But there was a reason I can't remember. There was a reason I went back to it specifically.
I think people likened it to Zelda, up to and including it having this green cloak wearing protagonist or green garbed protagonist. Not really a cloak, but that it had some connection to that. And I think people made that connection kind of later, is my recollection as well. So that's possible. It did also get a re-release in HD, a handful of years after its original release. Possibly you were like, oh, I'll check that out for
that could have been. I think that
$10 on Xbox or whatever. Yeah, whenever it was. I mean, I played it and completed it in 2003 or 2004. I had a GameCube and I played it on that. It was also out on the PS2 and I guess the Xbox. I think it was on everything at the time. And I played all of it. I went and found all of the pearls. I remember delving in substantially into this game. Yep. Yeah. This and like Okami a couple of years later, games where it's like a million.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, we should play that sometime. Keeping my PS2 just so I can play Okami again. I really like that game as well. Another unusual protagonist. But we'll get to that. So, we've talked about 2003 before, not that long ago, really. Sands of Time. Do you ever wish you could rewind time?
Oh
But
boy.
the games from that year that I picked out, a couple originals. Knights of the Old Republic, Call of Duty from that year, Simpsons Hit and Run, which is, I guess, sort of a GTA clone, is my recollection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was open world kind of.
Yeah, Freedom Fighters. And I'm looking here. Oh, WarioWare, Mega Micro Games, Ikaruga you picked out as well, which I also played a little bit of on the GameCube. That's a brain breaker of a shooter, shmup, as they say. But a lot of sequels. Jak 2, Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, a beloved game of mine because there's a boss where they don't tell you where his weak point is, and it's just like his groin. You just have to shoot the giant robot in the groin, and they never comment on it. They just it's very Ratchet and Clank because they don't say anything. If they were joking about it, it wouldn't be Ratchet and Clank, but they just don't say anything. You just have to figure out. It's hilarious. Anyway, Mario Kart Double Dash. Some other originals. 13, which was like it's another French title from a French comic book, I believe, about an assassin. I don't remember if he lost his memory or something. It's kind of a cel-shaded first-person shooter thing that I liked. I remember playing. Manhunt, Final Fantasy X-2, Tony Hawk's Underground, Silent Hill 3, lots of sequels here. Legacy of Kain Defiance, that ties into another series we've done. And I also called out Lord of the Rings Return of the King because I think that was one of the last games that they did at EA Redwood Shores before they became what was the Visceral Games. We talked to Ian Millam a couple of years ago now, I think, for Dead Space, like a year and a half ago.
What is time?
Yep. It goes fast. So anyway, bunch of interesting games. Maybe some on there we should, take a look at sometime. Max Payne 2 in particular is one I'm really looking forward to their remaster, re-release, whatever thing, because I'd like to play that one. I never did check that one out, and it doesn't look super great on the original Xbox, which is what I have it for. It's pretty old looking at this point, so I'd like to see it in a fresh coat of paint. Anyway, so this game features the exploits of, as you mentioned, Paige and Jade, two people who are maintaining a lighthouse and looking after orphaned children of war. I think that basically is what they're doing, which is wild. And they, in addition to doing kind of odd jobs with repairs and things like that, they also have a photojournalist service. It's kind of funny. Like they're just trying to make ends meet. It's just what I love about these characters.
Yeah, it's a very relatable, even though it's science fiction. I feel like.
Yeah, they are. It's comedy too. Like they're attacked at the beginning of the game by the big alien menace, and their electrical shield that will prevent them dying is just not turned on because they haven't been able to pay the electrical bill, which is how it's. So you can see who the real enemy is going to be: capitalism.
Yeah.
So I guess we should first talk about this being our third Ubisoft game. You were kind of talking about the different thrusts of Ubisoft before. You want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. I think it bears mentioning because obviously everyone listening has played or knows of at least Ubisoft over the years, and they have their big franchises that they still sort of foster today. We played Far Cry, of course. We haven't played Assassins, but Prince was sort of in the lineage of Assassin's Creed. And then but they have this sort of category that they've always dabbled with, and I actually would put Rabbids and Mario and Rabbids, the tactical game in this area too. Ubisoft has always either appreciated or attempted to partner and appreciate, Nintendo. I think that
Yes, yeah.
there's some underpinning of Ubisoft there where they've always wanted to be another Nintendo, and there's a lot of respect there. They were often in every major Nintendo platform. They were often one of the early publishers to adopt it. Even the Wii U, the Wii
No, that's
itself.
true. Yeah.
They were always like, yeah, well, this Switch thing, sure, let's do it.
I mean, Nintendo's really the Jerry Lewis of console manufacturers, and the French and Jerry Lewis, right? I mean,
oh man, wow,
yeah,
that
pretty strained.
Weird joke,
it's very particular.
That's very particular. Everyone, yeah.
The two of you who went for that joke, I really appreciate you. I see you out there.
Yeah, the two 50-year-olds. Anyway, yeah. So there's a whole category of Ubisoft that I think, because of their big franchises, which have had movies and all sorts of stuff, we forget about sometimes. And I forgot, of course, the Tom Clancy or the Rainbow Six and Splinter Cell stuff as well in there. But Beyond Good and Evil falls in with a little bit with Rayman and the Rabbids, which I think the Rabbids are from Rayman, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
So they have these more. Oh, and then what was that? That Zelda Breath of the Wild clone.
Is it Immortals or something like that?
Yeah, Immortals. Yeah,
Immortals something.
Yeah, Immortals Never Ending.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was called either.
Really
but yeah,
memorable.
Yeah.
But I
Phoenix Rising. Phoenix Rising
sure.
is what it was called.
Perfect.
Something of the Immortals, Realms of the Immortals, Tales of the Immortals, whatever.
Yeah,
something of the Immortals.
Branding, perfect. Yeah. I actually did hear good things about the game, but long story short, there's a category oftentimes driven by Paris, the Paris studios and the European studios over there, and Michel was one of the main directors over there. So I just wanted to bring it up in that Ubisoft is so often known for these categories, but I think they've always had this pretty strong stable of more lighthearted, more, action-y, kind of fun, not lower, I don't want to say, lower age groups, but just more E for everyone,
Yeah.
And more cartoony and just fun. Because they've always been an interesting publisher for lots of reasons. Sometimes not great ones, but also some good ones. And I think a lot of times this category doesn't get a lot of as much credit, I think, for their identity as it should. And this one is a cult classic, I think, at this point. This particular game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and there's of course the infamous sequel.
Yeah, we're still waiting. I mean, it's almost 7 years now since its announcement, I'm sure. And there were years before that where people were speculating. I mean, people did really clamor for a sequel. I think technically that's a prequel. I remember seeing that video in 2017 and thinking, "Wow, that's nothing like what I think of this this game." Which was the even funnier thing. I mean, I remember there being some sort of monkey or ape or something that was prominently displayed. I just was like looking at it like open world, huge. Yeah, I was just like, what is that? What am I looking at? Remembering this game, which felt, even though it's in this kind of quirky world, it's still, like we were talking about, feels very grounded. The only other Ubisoft sort of main thing that we've never kind of really, we probably won't address ever, is they have an extremely powerful, popular rather, dance series called Let's Dance. So don't look for us to play those anytime
People would love us to play that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Talk about Jerry Lewis.
Yeah. Wow.
Hey lady.
Full circle.
Yep.
Apparently I'm also reading here that there is a film adaptation that is in the works at Netflix.
Of what?
Of Beyond Good and Evil, which I cannot believe. Hybrid live action animated.
Huh.
That can't be a thing.
That doesn't seem real to me.
So 2017.
It's going to be a race between Beyond Good and Evil 2 and that Netflix series, I think.
Right. So 2017 was the sequel announcement. And apparently it also is a prequel, which I did not realize.
Yeah, that's what I said just a moment ago. But that's
okay.
That's
I don't listen to you very closely.
Yeah, I get it.
As we know.
Yeah, we are the Lewis and Martin right here. And I think at the moment I'm the Lewis. Anyway, let's then move on. We were talking about this sort of unique world, relatable problems. I love that this game starts with the very funny problem of like, we can't turn on this huge thing that's going to allow us to survive, because we can't afford it. United States healthcare system, anyone? And it's but she manages to fight off this creature, these series of creatures, which was, I don't know, it gives me sort of a like Sonic the Hedgehog, like Dr. Robotnik vibe, because he imprison all the animals? Like, isn't that his whole shtick? Like, you're trying to free the various animals.
I don't know. I don't remember. Yeah. I mean, I immediately thought of Kingdom Hearts for some reason. I just feel like not necessarily the imprisonment stuff, but just the enemy design, kind of these floating things with hands, and I don't know.
Nobody's in Heartless.
Yeah, and it was also kind of on a 2D plane, the way the camera worked for that sequence. So it was like, and not that Kingdom Hearts is on a 2D plane all the time, but I don't know. It just had and you're swinging a
stick,
essentially, right?
Daijo, she calls it, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Which I think basically means big stick. I think that's basically what that translates to. It's kind of funny because it starts right into it. Like, this is happening. Like, it spends no time really setting this up other than, we need money, which is kind of the major motivator for the beginning of the game, and goes straight into, and now you're fighting a bunch of things to learn the combat. It very sort of, it's sort of this is back when we were saying, okay, people don't read the manuals, we have to tutorialize a lot of stuff, and this, it's basically doing that. It's, you're starting off bashing a bunch of things. I'm sure it's possible to fail, but I think it would be hard. But you can also heal and all of that stuff in that section. You're and these things are grabbing up the orphans under your charge, and you fend them off, and then you fight like the main one, and it seems like it implants something in your brain.
Yeah.
So it was my
there's some sort of right. They take over whoever's inside. Yeah.
No, I meant when she's
Oh yeah. When you fight the kind of mini boss
down at the
visions. Right.
You learn that she can do a power attack. Yeah. That there's something going on there. Now she's the chosen one. She's touched by the weird alien thing. And it kind of sets up this world in which, she kind of comes like, it has a little bit of a Ratchet and Clank vibe as well, as far as, this media personality who's there interviewing them, and, her not having a lot positive to say, certainly Paige not having a lot positive to say, but all the military being like, yep, we did it. You're okay now, ma'am. Despite the fact that they've done nothing, has that vibe as well. So
and I think the opening, I think Ratchet and Clank's a good reference point. I don't know. It just feels like there was a tone of game around this time. It wasn't listed in the ones that you listed from this particular year, but the ones we've played, I mentioned this in pre-show, because it's like, it's not, I guess it's canned, but the opening sequences are very, of course they have the cinematics, but the opening fight sequence, like you mentioned, they're very custom, and it made me immediately think of Final Fantasy IX in some ways. It made me think of Anachronox, and it made me think of Kingdom Hearts, which I already mentioned, and sort of like these weird, I'm calling them weird, it's maybe unfair, but weird RPG hybrid, kind of pseudo open world kind of games that were all, similar poly counts, similar production values, similar custom, like if the early game is anything like the rest of the game, just like very custom puzzles, custom actions. You can see the scripting in the
Yeah,
game. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's like we have this script. The bane of Brett's existence. Sometimes we have this scripting system. Look what we can do with it. We can do anything.
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make this person jump up this ledge, and I'm gonna make this bomb out of. It's like it's not doesn't seem to be systemic at all. And but like it was okay. That was an okay thing to do at the time. That was how so many things were done. Couldn't get away with it these days, but well, some studios do ultra linear, ultra custom stuff, but very few. Um, Even those are going to be based on systems at the end of the day. But yeah, I don't know. It just I had forgotten how much of one of those it was, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, I know. In the first, I don't know, 15 minutes or whatever, you have this combat section, which kind of gets the story going. You have some, you get your camera to start earning money. You have this, AI buddy, Segundo, who's a great character. You do a bunch of photography. You do some exploration of the island you're on, because you want to find enough to. You have to find enough to put the shield on. Basically, you have to find enough things to photograph. I think, which is only a couple, right? It's only 2, but you can get 10 or 11 just in that one building, and upgrade your camera already. So you're starting to see like all the different pieces of what you're going to be doing. Like, okay, I'm going to do a lot of photography because that's the way I get upgrades and pearls, which are the major currency for upgrading your hovercraft, which you soon learn because you take your hovercraft out because you're supposed to meet some client who's going to pay you a bunch of simoleons, whatever they're called, and that person is while you're on the way, that person, the ship breaks down, and you've got to you get dragged into the garage, and you say, oh, I'm going to have to power up my first thing you have to do is take the one pearl you might have at that point, and pay for this upgrade, which is just a new engine so that you can move around. It's just kind of like, okay, and there's that. And then what else can I do? Oh, well, you can take pictures of maps and you'll get a map. It'll turn it into a 3D map that you can use. And you're going to go into this dungeon and you're going to work with your, companion to solve that dungeon.
Yeah.
Loosely calling it a dungeon, but, constrained space, action space.
I think it's totally, yeah. I mean, dungeon is
dungeon's
appropriate.
probably,
It's got.
yeah.
I mean, I think we're going to probably reference Zelda and potential Nintendo influence, even though ironically they've always been more modular and systemic in their design, even going back to the original Zelda. But there, yeah. I mean, even a small moment, I think, as an example that I want to mention, and I just realized I thought of a way to describe my macro topic here in a second, but maybe you didn't experience this, but once you fix the ship and you're heading to the Black Isle, is that what it's called?
Black Isle, yep.
Yeah, Black Isle. Weird.
Yep.
If you go a certain way, then the sort of like police bot.
Oh yeah, I've had that happen.
Around.
Yeah, not this time, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's just an example to your point of like how much happens in the first 20 minutes of the game. There's also like these patrolling bots that you have to kind of like sneak around, in the water. I'm saying in your ship.
Yeah.
So
and I forgot, you also shoot up an alien snake creature. Right. I forgot that one. That's where you get a pearl as well. That's your second pearl.
Right. Yeah. So your ship combat. So it's like the jelly ship. What's it called? Gummy ship.
Gummy ship. Yeah.
The gummy ship. So it's like. And then if you look in the the store, not the store, but the mechanic shop,
Mama
there's
Goes.
a bunch of kiosks that have a lot. You can see a lot of the upgrades you're going to be able to buy with your pearls down the road.
Yeah,
there's actually quite a deep bench
all of
there
them.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's
a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah,
it's surprising. But I think what I realize is that like because we've played 2D adventures of various types on the podcast as well. There was this, and I'm sure we talked about this to some degree, even with like games like Legacy of Kain or something like that. There was this migration and merging of the adventure game mentality with action games, and then throw in a little RPG as well. And because everything's so custom, and there's this like chapter after chapter, and like puzzles and like events that happen in a specific order, and you have to do a thing before you can progress. It's kind of got that adventure game feel to me as well, even though there's combat as well. So there was just this kind of, and maybe it's just my age and generation of game player, there was just this era of this mushing together of various genres. We talked a lot about RPGs leaking into everything at this point, but that wasn't always the thing. So I think it's a magical game in that regard, because it is very much a time capsule, I think, of that early 2000s, where we were all trying to figure out, how do you not just make a first person shooter? How do you not just make, a side scroller?
Yeah.
And we had people were making engines, like as you mentioned in pre-show, this engine was used only for this game, we think.
Yep.
It was called the Jade engine. And so people could do that.
I think they cobbled it for parts a little bit, and some of it went into the engines that were part of like the Great Valiant Hearts, the Great War, and so like they redid the rendering, but like pieces of it kind of did live on. But yeah, it kind of was a one and done engine.
Yeah, which was, like, to your point, when I brought that up, that was a thing that was more possible to do and that people did back then, because it was almost like more of, whether it was Michel or whoever it was, they had a game they wanted to make, or a team had a game they wanted to make, and they're like, well, let's just make that. And it could include the engine, and
I mean, we talked about that, when we had, I'm not going to remember his name, but for Metroid Prime.
Oh yeah.
Like you made the engine to do the thing that you wanted to do, and this was kind of the last, sort of the last time that you did that. I mean, there's a lot of custom rendering that would happen for the next generation after this, so the PS3 and the 360. But after that, the model pretty much coalesced on a PC model for those two consoles. Nintendo's always been its own thing, but and I'm sure there are people still kind of do, mostly do a new engine for whatever they're doing for, the Switch or what have you. I mean, those, I'm sure that, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, those are the two games that use that engine ever. Right. So I think this still lives on at Nintendo, but, but by and large, out in the wider world, because the consoles have kind of become very similar in terms of their capability, and even in some of their sort of libraries and interfaces, at least sort of the philosophy behind them, it really makes sense to reuse a lot more code. And of course you need a lot more code to do all the different things you're going to do in a game. So it's why that, the Unreal Engines and the Unities and what have you are so ubiquitous as a sort of place to build on top of. Back then it was, well, there are a lot of games like this where it's like, well, it's this and it's this and it's this other thing, kind of all at once, and they were trying to be a more full experience. You had mentioned like Shenmue before we started, and it just was kind of the thing to do, was to just have a broader experience. I think to some degree you can track that back to GoldenEye as well. Like you have to, having a part where you have to throw out your gun, like, oh man, like just like the things that and having a tank section, and like, well, we're just going to do the story we want to do, and that story's going to have lots of elements in it, and we're just going to do all that stuff. And I do think that kind of, as you mentioned, sort of began in Japan.
Yeah, and I think there's also, like, and this is maybe stretching a little bit, Jack Matthews, by the way, was the
Jack Matthews. I was like Matthew, but I couldn't get to the first name.
But there was also an era in this time, because there was, this game is stylized. Even in a high fidelity version, it'd be more stylized. But we weren't yet chasing photorealism. But there was this sort of air of how do we, to your point about like GoldenEye, and you mentioned some of the EA games where they were doing licensed games like Lord of the Rings and stuff, where I was like, how do we compete with movies? How do we have all of the different experiences you would have in a movie, a car chase and a plane and a gunfight or whatever, and it was very much like a yes era. We talk about that a lot on the podcast, where it's like this game feels like a yes game. They're like, well, this is our world, and we're going to kind of create it from scratch. We're going to have some combat, hand-to-hand combat. We're going to have a boat. We're going to have photographs, which we'll talk more about the photographs as we go. But this, as far as legacy goes, the photograph stuff in this game had, I think, a big influence on a lot of other games later. But it was like, well, we want, like you said, a full experience like other mediums have. And so because we have these lower poly, this engine that can do a lot of different things, but it's very custom, it's like, well, we'll just do it. Like the other thing that bugs me about this game that I think we're going to keep coming back to is that you can tell, like, the cracks start coming out with the camera because they have some sections where the camera takes control away, where they take control away from your camera. They have some sections where it's crafted and then pseudo you have control. It's very weird.
Yeah.
And inconsistent. But again, that's an example of stretching beyond the boundaries of what, it's like what they're trying to do. They want to be cinematic, but they also want it to be a game.
Also reminds me of Galleon, another we've talked about before. Just another one of those games where it's like, we're going to just do the whole, in that case, pirate experience. In this case, it's, the photojournalist, has to get around. It's kind of like, granted, the setting kind of obscures that's basically what it is, but it's like, well, yeah, they've got to get in their car and get to the place where the job is to, there's going to be a lot more of that coming up. Certainly, I remember like the next thing is maybe the factory. I think this is the next thing where you're kind of starting to uncover what's going on in the story. I do remember that being a thing. I do remember also this game really getting a lot of kudos for being, for the camera being like another way to interact with the world, that there were, when you were being the character, which is a thing that I definitely remember it standing out and people saying, yeah, there's a non-violent way to interact with the world. There's also combat, but like you're going around in these spaces, you can appreciate them. Like it extends the gameplay. Sort of honestly, like the scanning mode does in Metroid Prime. It's the same thing where you have another verb that you've basically overlaid across your whole space, which is cool. It also makes you pay more attention to those, and and they're very inventive in what they've built, in terms of the creatures and
snail, that big. Did you find that big snail that pokes its head out in the dungeon?
You mean that you fight?
No. It's just a passive. There's a little nook.
Oh, I might not have.
Where the floor looks dangerous. It's like a glowing aqua like brain looking thing.
Huh.
And you can walk over that, which I think you can take a picture of that too. You can walk over that and it squishes. It's like water. So it didn't look like I was supposed to go that way. You go across that thing, and on the other side in the corner is this huge snail shell on the wall, and there's this little snail. They're not, it's a big snail head, but he kind of peeks his head out at different intervals, and you have to like catch a picture.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Right yeah, but it's just like, it may be the only time that you see that thing or something.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. I got all of the stuff the first time I played it, right? I did literally every picture. So I have seen it before. I don't know if you have to. I feel like this is a game where it's like, oh no, you have to do all of that. I can remember scrounging for all the, I guess they're called PA1s. They're like these power-ups to give you an additional heart instead of getting them from killing the boss. Like in a Zelda, you just find them in these vending machines in different locations in the world. And I can remember like just going everywhere in the world to find. I think at some point you get like a here's where all the things are kind of map. You know, that was pretty common at the time too. I mean, Sly Cooper had one of those that was quite good and really good hinting. I think this game does it as well, because I do think that the economy of the things you need to progress the story is very tight. So you need to do all the things is my vague recollection. Not generally a fan of that as a design, although as a completist, that doesn't necessarily affect me. I also don't love the idea that I have to do it. So even though I will do it and you can't stop me, I still don't like it that you're going to make me.
That's the fine line.
Yeah. So anyway, it's pretty unique kind of feeling game, but definitely of a vibe of the era for sure.
Yeah. It's
I mean, it is also a human and a pig.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I mean, it was hard to say what the prequel has to do with this game so far, but they're definitely like, it's got unique characters. You know? Even the kids, the design of the kids is very, I think, very special.
Half of them are human and half are something else.
Yeah, and it's like I think it feels like, I don't remember, so I think it'll take a while for us as we go through the game to confirm this, but it's a very like special, unique kind of world. You know, just the tone of it, the aesthetics, the characters, like the fiction. It feels, special. I don't know how, like, I'm sure it's an auteur kind of thing, right? Where like there's sort of a singular vision around what it is or something.
I mean, when your first client is a dude who is standing outside of a huge limo, and then later on it's revealed that the limo is just a sham around his tiny little cab. It's like, this is its own thing. This is a very different sort of world. Like, it's, I mean, that's such a weird thing. It's just, when you think about it, it's like, so let me get this right. You built another car core around your car. It's just the shell of a car or body, I guess you'd say. And then, and it's got a sunroof that your actual car can float out of. It's so weird.
And then he picks you up in the taxi and drives you away.
Yeah.
And then he also made up a
another guy,
cover called Mr. Cadillac, I think.
Mr.
Cadillac.
It's not exactly that, but it's close to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like Castellac, I think, but
Castellac, whatever.
Mr. de Castellac. Yeah.
But it's so like, I don't know. It just feels like, again, it's like, well, we're just gonna go to the Hilton and just have fun creating this weird adventure game. It really is a time capsule in a lot of ways, I feel like. And I guess I'm definitely, as we know from many episodes of this podcast, my memory's not good, but I don't know, is Anachronox not a good reference point, or is it a good, because it feels like...
I think it is. I mean, I think Anachronox is very much of this point in time as well. Like, we were... Like, the time it took to build things was not crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I remember the quote is like, a Wolfenstein or Doom level took a day to build, a Quake level took a week to build, and now it takes, however many months and months, years really to make the pieces that go into a level. So this was a time where we were kind of having, especially the PlayStation 2 era, which had just a huge variety of games in it. I mean, it kind of spilled over into the other consoles as well, but PS2 is where the real, what Will Wright would call a precambrian explosion was happening, because they were relatively cheap still to make. Not as cheap as they maybe had been, but still pretty cheap, and the market was there, because the PlayStation 2 had sold whatever 100 million units or something like that. So the PlayStation 2s were everywhere, and so there's opportunity there to like have this niche. I'm sure the attach rates were higher. Certainly they were generally higher on Nintendo hardware. They always have been, for whatever reason. I guess, that's the only place you can get certain games. And it just meant that experimentation was a real possibility. And so, really pushing further and being like, we're going to do this. We're going all in on this whole story with all these different parts. I mean, I remember hearing that, I guess it's Nightfire, I think, is the one. It might have been Everything or Nothing or whatever the other 007. But like they had a scripter, a programmer, who was doing scripting and programming per level, of that game.
Yeah.
To help get the variety that those levels had. Which is a thing you could do at the time, and you could never do that now because you'd actually need multiple programmers probably to support. So everything is much more systemic. That doesn't end up being the approach, but you could still do that then.
Right. And I think that's the rub there, and a good example of the development side and production side of how it would work, because you could get away with, because of the fidelity, because of I don't want to call it the everything game, but it's like the whatever we want game, for the most part. And I think, I guess it's funny to think about it because of the ebbs and flows of the industry over the years through the games that we've been playing, that where we kind of end up now, somewhat through production challenges and cost, team size, whatever. But the indie space, I think, is an even better example of where I think we get to, of like, maybe it's me evolving as a player, but I like where we are today because I think games, they're not trying to do everything at once, and it forces us all to be more focused about what we're trying to make rather than just kitchen sinking it. And I think the games end up being, for me at least as a player, better for it. That you're not trying to, like, if you can imagine, and maybe that's why the sequel/prequel is not succeeding, is that they're trying to do too many things.
Or,
trying to emulate.
Hear me out, Tim. Maybe it is succeeding. It's gonna be this and amazing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I want good things. I want good games. So, and I want to be surprised. They showed that sort of from space to ground thing in the demo.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call it demo. I don't know what you call it, but that everyone's chased, and No Man's Sky succeeded. So too late. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's another example to your point about how, what the scale of things had to become to keep making the everything game, or the whatever you want kind of game, or multi-game, many games in one. Having been on projects that had many games in one, I just appreciate how it's like, okay, well, if we're making stuff so high fidelity, you can't make this much stuff anymore. So you have to pick your battles.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'd rather this, to be honest. I would rather not care that the stick actually hits the enemy, and it's kind of abstracted, and you just kind of like, the distance.
You're saying use stylization to allow you to give flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I prefer, like, I mean, I love a game that plays really, really well, and does its one thing really, really well. But I also love these wild swings that just do way more.
That have more jank in them, but
I'm fine. I kind of fine. I mean, I worked at Jank Central, so it's kind of wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, hope none of you are listening.
That's a swing. Well, I mean, it's not. You said it, but it's not like it's.
It's not like it's news.
But they have great success that way, and it is, and those games are swing for the fences games, and you take what you get with them. So I think that is a good example. That's a good counterexample. Yeah, I mean, I'd like both, but I feel like I mean, I think that's where one thing where we sometimes differ in our likes and dislikes is that I like I don't know. I usually overuse the word elegant, but I'll say this time I kind of like a clean package. You know what I mean? It can do a variety of things, but I put maybe like Valheim in an example, like the survival genre is a good example of this, where people are using technology and procedural solutions to make a lot of content,
Hmm.
and a variety of things. Um, but and yeah, if I guess if the janky game's good, the irony though with your example from your past is I still don't play those games.
I mean, yeah, I don't either. I
Yeah,
mean, that's more because of the particular setting and stuff. I've kind of, it's just not my thing really anymore. Uh, but I mean, I would totally play. If there was a Beyond Good and Evil style game every year, I would totally play it. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Well, maybe the indie space is a place to go. I'm trying to think of if there's some analogies there where it is about smaller teams being scrappy.
yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, it's just the visibility is really not there. Is my problem with that. It's really hard to know.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that break out.
Got to be
And
something obvious we're not thinking of. Oh, well, it's not exactly the same thing, but I would use Lethal Company. I'd put in this category
hmm,
where a breakout success, and Valheim a little bit. There's definitely jank in there, but still, I think a brilliant game. But Lethal Company, I think, is not in the same genre. It's a replayable session based game, but it's just fun enough in its jankiness that it's a charming aspect to it.
hmm.
Um, Sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, I also don't like. There's things here that I like. Like you said, the camera's a little, like stuff like that, and I can definitely appreciate. Like, it would be nice if those sorts of things were better. But there are things I don't care about, like
Yeah,
how much fidelity there is. It's not so much that I don't want fidelity in the animation. I just don't care if the feet slide. Like,
totally.
things like that don't bother me at all. So I mean, that's all kind of down to personal taste. There are people for whom, foot sliding, absolutely drive them mad, and so, like, I totally get it, and it's definitely a question of taste. I would happily take, though, like, more systems in a story that feels, like all of the things were kind of needed to do the thing. Like, I think Half-Life 2, and maybe to some degree Half-Life, was the one that kind of like set us on this path to some degree. Like,
Hmm.
in, what was it, 98 or 90, I guess it was 98, right? That Half-Life comes out and has lots of different sorts of things in it, and then Half-Life 2 bookending that in 2005, or 2004, around then. I think it was 2005. Has also a ton of different, like, gameplay in it. You control those ant things, and you're shooting around on that hovercraft as well. It's sort of, I don't know what that would be called, but that kind of speedboat thing, and
Hmm.
little cars. I mean, just all kinds of vehicle stuff. Lots of different things in that as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's, maybe that's some of where that was coming as well, both on the PC side too, and in the West, and not just in coming from Japan, and the, whatever the wacky things were coming out of both JRPGs, but also just your, I don't know, your Kingdom Hearts, but also your, whatever, Mr. Mosquito, like, your weird experiments, types of games.
I feel, and I know this is definitely too much of a reduction, but I do feel like Kingdom Hearts, because they've even had pretty recent releases, still, and this is just me watching you and others in our day job occasionally, play three. It's like they're still doing these crazy custom sequences
Yeah.
that are highly specific and
Yeah.
only this one time, and it's on a big budget. So, they're still, and
But
it's
the
not like
feet
they're,
the feet still slide, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
is
exactly.
is what
That's
it
what I was
comes
going to
down to.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not without jank, but it doesn't really matter because you're, you're in it for that, for what it is. Yeah, it's a fascinating. I mean, this is definitely, we've been on a tangent for a while on this, but I think it's pretty related to the game. And one summary I'm coming to, in my mind at least, is that, polish in video games is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, because it just will continue to give us variety, and people can swing for the fences if they want to in different ways.
Yeah, I'm another interesting experiment that's, enjoying some success right now is Dragon's Dogma 2, which is a sequel to Dragon's Dogma, which again, same sort of thing where it's like, this is definitely not to everybody's taste. It is definitely strange, is definitely janky. But like, I can remember something that happened to me in that game, which I played when I was out there.
You're a fan of the first one.
Yeah, I was there when this happened to me. I was on Bainbridge, where I just had this night of terror in the game where I got lost in the woods. And I was trying to make my way back to the path, and I strayed too far, and it got dark, and I was attacked by both a griffin and a dragon, and I had to run for my life, and I finally got back to the path, and and no other game really delivers that. And it's because of its weird systems and like all these things that just kind of come together in weird ways. I mean, this game we're playing is not that exactly, but it's like the same thing where there's some memorable things that happen. Here, they're more likely to be very authored to be memorable, and bringing it back to it. Like, I think the choice of characters and like this tight relationship between, Jade and Paige, makes the game really cozy and memorable. It's they're great friends, right? And he cares deeply about her, and she cares deeply about him, and that comes across in the voice performances. And
I think I was going to mention the voice acting is quite good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the woman who played Jade passed away in 2017. I looked that up because I was like, man, I don't know if I've heard this person's voice anywhere else, but she's really good. I had forgotten because it's been so long. He's really good too, David Gassman. And I don't know if I just mentioned her name, but her name's Jodie Forrest. He's still with us. He's in his 60s now, but and has done tons and tons of voice work. She didn't do nearly as much, but I mean, this is a plum part, and she really nails it. I think there's a huge amount of character in her voice, and I think actually, it's one of those roles you can point at and say, this is why, SAG-AFTRA, negotiates for, whatever they negotiate for, is because it really can make a big difference in a character's, how a character is portrayed, how we connect with the characters, I should say.
Well, another game that embraces the jank and leans into it and still has depth and surprising moments, including terror, Dark Souls. We brought it back around.
I
found a way to weave it in there.
I spent the whole time saying, I'm not going to say Dark Souls. I'm not going to say Dark Souls. And you went there.
Just went there.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's like, what do you care about? And for a lot of people, that's, it's not what they want, but I am playing Dark Souls like right now, and I'm enjoying it very much. So that's Remnant, which I think you played.
Oh yeah, Remnant. Yeah, Dark Souls shooter.
Yeah, I like it.
Interesting. Yeah,
it's cool.
They literally have. I don't know. You don't care about spoilers, but you probably got to it already. But they literally have a moth boss.
I've not got there yet.
and when I got to that boss in Dark Souls, I was like, wait a second, this is a little bit too close to home.
I'm fighting the dragon Singe. So anyway, now we're very far.
Anyway, okay. So I think it's a lovely game. I'm excited we're playing it. It is a gem, no pun intended, to Jade. But
thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Technically not a gem in her case.
I know. I figured you were going to say that.
A bit of a stretch, but it's all right. But we will dive back into more of the mechanics next week. We will see more of the mechanics next week. We have
I want to
not
talk about level design at the first level next week too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll do that, and we're going to see more of that. I don't know how far we'll play, but we'll have to discuss that because you remember it is longer than I do, so you might be right in that. I don't remember. I do remember searching for all the pearls and things and all the things I had to photograph. So I know that can take a while.
I mean, if you look in that, excuse me, mechanics store, and all the pearls that you're going to buy, you spend to buy stuff on. I mean, that's one of the things costs 15 pearls by itself.
Well, the last thing cost 30.
Oh, 30. Yeah. So so that's a lot.
Yep. It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know. Yeah, we should. Sometimes I feel like we should check out how long to beat before we play these games. Anyway.
Well, I just chalk it on, throw it onto the pile.
Yep. Well, I think we can get through it. Let's turn to email. We have one email this week sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. There's no specific question here, but it was of a topic or of something I wasn't familiar with. I kind of know some of the pieces here. So I'm kind of curious what you think about them, sir. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Okay. Subject is MMORLG. Okay. Mr. McEvil. Dear Dev Game Club, I'm a long-time sporadic listener. I was pulled in with the Final Fantasy IX Kotaku crowd, but tend to listen in blocks of 6 months to a year at a time. I found recently that the podcast makes for good listening in the gym. It keeps my brain occupied, but much less likely to drop something on my head from sudden laughter, which is a concern with my. Oops, I just hit a button. With my usual comedy podcast, I've nearly caught up at this point. Just about to start another world. I've been meaning to send this mail for a long time now. Back in December, I had one of those situations where several things seemed to converge at me at once for me. I was listening to your series on Rogue while God of War Ragnarok, which I loved, released its Valhalla DLC, a roguelike, multi-run, randomly generated dungeon. I did not know that. At the same time, I had just discovered it. Right around the same time, I also discovered randomizers. If you are not familiar, randomizer is basically a mod for a game which swaps around all of the items you receive from cheats, level ups, shops, key story events, etc. For example, I saw a randomizer for The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, where the guy didn't get a sword for about 10 hours into the game. Okay.
That would be tricky.
Yeah, I knew of these, but I didn't really know how deep they went. That's amazing. What I had been watching,
you'd be hitting everything with a Deku stick or something like that, which
right?
is astonishing to think about. Yeah.
What I have been watching quite regularly are randomizers for Kingdom Hearts 2. Okay, that's very specific. I won't go into much of the explanation about how the randomizer works. See links below for more info. But with an interesting tracker and a point system, players are creating their own game types. This is mostly an offshoot of the speedrunning community, so these game types typically take between 2 to 3 hours. It struck me that with the short playtime, the randomly placed items and abilities, and with some areas of the game locked by certain items, what they have basically created is roguelike Kingdom Hearts. Whoa. As an offshoot to the Kingdom Hearts randomizers, I also discovered Archipelago, a cross-game multi-world service which allows supported randomizer games to share all their items across games. What?
Yep.
So Link in Ocarina of Time can open a chest and find a Keyblade for Sora. I believe. Oh my God! This is the metaverse.
What is this game world that we've made?
Yeah, this is the metaverse now. I believe Archipelago, which is a perfect name by the way, can support thousands of players and games at a time. So theoretically, you could have a game start. Everyone collects their first check, and one person suddenly gets every item in their game. Oh, what? Or some poor guy who can't beat their game until everyone else has finished. Effectively, Archipelago. Ah, I see where he's coming from. Okay. Facilitates MMORLG, massively multiplayer online roguelike games. I found this all very interesting because personally I've never been a fan of roguelike games. I do see the appeal and value in the replayability of these games, but they just aren't for me. I do also think it's fantastic that these are all community driven projects, and it's amazing to see what people can do to extend the lives of games they love. Sorry for the long winded email or long winded mail. The Google Podcast app doesn't support reviews, but 5 stars keep up the great work. Regards, Mr. McEvil, which is my real name, kind of. It's actually David McEvely. P.S. I live in Galway, Ireland, and frequently pass Romero games. I have seen John Romero around, but have had the pleasure to attend a talk by Brenda Romero, a very engaging and interesting woman in her own right. She is, very much so. Wow, that was a journey.
It is a journey. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I actually
I'm not
feel
sure
like
I fully understand everything that Archipelago does, but yeah, sorry.
yeah, it'd be basically like things are randomized across games. And so when I find something in my game, that unlocks something that is something that came from your game.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. But I don't think that they're like, as he was describing, I don't think they're paired together in that way. It's a huge bucket. So
you could get something totally useless
right
from another game.
Presumably the more people playing the more games, the more likely that is. Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. Wow.
And I feel like I'm trying to remember whether it was somebody in the community who was working on a randomizer. Feels like something Nolan would do.
I think you're right. I think it's come up before, but it was not as in-depth as this one.
Yeah.
And I think
if you did do it and it wasn't Nolan, my apologies. I feel like it was Nolan. But I may not be remembering that correctly.
He would do.
It does. It sounds like something you would do, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, I can even imagine. It
might have been Mystery,
where you have multiple people playing just Rogue.
Yeah,
but it's connected. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like you do something in your Rogue game, or you find something, and then it somehow impacts somebody else. Yeah, it's so doing that across games. Or
like the knowledge is shared, so like all of you have the amethyst ring is the same ring for all of you.
Oh my gosh!
So somebody figures out what it is, and then you all know.
Yeah,
that would actually make it a lot easier.
But I mean,
at least if you're one of the later people playing, anyway.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that it scales with people too is also weird. I think I've admitted this on the podcast before, but I've never read Ready Player One.
Yeah, not missing much.
Yeah, I know you've said it before, and I'm not that drawn to it. I kind of get the concept, so I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
The 80s, woo! I just gave you Ready Player One in about
okay,
a second and a half.
But doesn't it also lean heavily into trying to people reference it metaverse wise, right? As far as
because it is together. Yeah, it mushes everything together. Yeah. But most of those things are like, remember this?
Yeah, nostalgia plays. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, it just randomizers. My joke is randomizers are Ready Player One. It sounds like to me. As far as like, that's really, and everyone. It's kind of now, luckily, becoming a little passe. The whole metaverse topic. Who's going to do it? Who's going to win, etc. And I joke a lot about how Fortnite is playing into that, but this sounds way cooler than any of the metaverse chasers right now.
This is really wild, and it's community driven. Yeah, and all the randomizer stuff is community driven, which is all. It's all great. It's very much in the spirit of speed running, and in fact, I think there are some speed runs, that are in the sort of awesome games done quick or whatever their various incarnations. Are randomizer runs. So you're like you don't know what order you're going to get your stuff.
Yeah.
And you're trying to go for a record.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. But I mean, again, because I love emergent games so much and those unintended consequences, that's what this is writ large, right? you don't know what, and that's one of the cool things about roguelites. It's also not, I think my heart is I'm a roguelike liker, but my time is not. It's like the concept of them I love, but I never can devote the time I really need to personally. But as a designer, I love the concept of them. But what I was going to say is, can you imagine, and this is where it gets tricky because I think publishers would get too heavily involved, which we don't want, but it's funny me saying that out loud. But can you imagine a world where I'll just say it in the most extreme manner, but all games have an option where you can turn randomizer connection on.
Yeah.
Like literally every game. It's like, you can turn it off so it doesn't mess you up. But once you're done with the game, you can just click this box and you're now connected to everybody else who clicked that box. And it could be any game.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? That would be amazing.
It sounds like something Peter Molyneux would do.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like the cube.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of that. Thanks for the email. And thanks for the, I think RIP to the Google Podcast app as well. I believe that just died, which I think means I'm supposed to put it all up on YouTube because that's how Google gets its podcast now. It's one of those things that's been on the list of like, I'm going to figure out one of these days, but I have not yet. And maybe someday I will.
Yeah.
And I know Johnny Pockets has mentioned it to me in email a couple of times and I just have not pushed on it yet, but someday. Somebody said to me, I think you can just do an RSS feed. And I was like, oh, well, that would be easy. And I haven't even done that. So anyway, thanks for the email. We do also love to read your reviews, such as the one we didn't get on the App Store, Google app, or podcast app rather in that case, but appreciated that you think we're 5 stars. We think we do okay. Production quality notwithstanding. We're on the web at devgameclub.com, on Twitter, Threads, and the Instagram at devgameclub. We sometimes Twitch, him more often than me, at twitch.tv/
Tim Longer Jr. with the JR at the end.
What are you playing these days? I've actually kind of lost track because you've been traveling and stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, I had to take 2 weeks off for travel for work mainly. I'm still playing Final Fantasy VI.
Right. Okay, yeah.
I think, if my memory serves, I'm... No. I don't think I'm... I was going to say I might be close to the big shift. But,
the World of Ruin.
Yeah, but I think I still have to do some stuff. Go to the city, I think. Yeah. So anyway, I'm pretty far in though. I mean, farther than I thought I'd get. I mean, I'm playing with 4X on everything. So. Right,
I know. So you're power leveling yeah, it's pretty funny to watch the battles. It's like, I just do, I don't know, whatever attack it is, where the prompts are on the screen. Yeah, and it's just like, the fire blast everything and it's over. Very entertaining to watch. Well, you can check that out. You can also check out our fan-run Discord. There's a link in the show notes. Good place to hang out from time to time. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kurt Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. Our logo, that Discord, our merch store, all by Mark Garcia, with others. Have fun addressing a final message to the population this week, and good night.
Good night.